You're listening to the Mind Your Business podcast, episode number 30. Today's episode is part 2 in our series called the Time Chronicles. And today, we're going to show you how to stop time. So, stay tuned. Hi, I'm James Wedmore, and I've built a 7-figure internet business that offers the financial freedom to do what I want, when I want. And I'm the first to say that hard work and hustle are not essential ingredients for your success. So, how do you build a thriving business from the inside out? This is the Mind Your Business podcast, featuring myself and co-host Phoebe Mroczek. All right. Hello, everybody. James Wedmore here.
And I'm Phoebe Mroczek.
And welcome to part 2 in our podcast series called the Time Chronicles.
I wish we had like fancy music to go behind that.
I feel like this should be a book series for kids. That's kind of what it feels like. It's like the Chronicles of Narnia and Lord of the Rings. There's a little Harry Potter-esque in there. No, we're talking about time. And today's episode is called How to Stop Time. How's that sitting with you?
I'm excited. This is the one I'm the most excited about, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. So I'm going to start with a story to just jump us right in there today. And the story took place, the year was 2012. And I was at a mastermind event in Palm Springs, California. And it was the last day of the mastermind. We were all there like at this huge mansion house in Palm Springs. It was an extraordinary home. We woke up that day and one of the guys I was with, we did a webinar in the morning. And webinars are awesome. Of course, I realized as I'm doing the webinar, I'm like, oh my gosh, I got a plane to catch. And he just kept going with the Q&A and didn't want to end the call. And there was like nothing I could do to like let him know I got to go. And long story short, I finally get off the webinar and I go onto my phone, beep, 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 beep. I take a look at the MapQuest and it says that it's going to be 60 minutes to get to San Bernardino Airport. And I haven't packed. My flight takes off in 50 minutes. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, I'm going to miss my flight. And, you know, that was a flight I didn't want to miss. I really, really didn't want to miss that flight. So here's what I did. I grabbed all my stuff. I didn't say goodbye to anybody. So everyone's still there. I just grabbed all my stuff and I threw it in my car. And I got in and I hit the pedal to the metal. And I made a decision. I said, I am going to make this flight. And what I did is as soon as I got in that car, I cranked up the music, put on my favorite music, and I looked like a crazy person. I sang at the top of my lungs. I shouted, just shouts of glee and joy and celebration. But basically, like if you're watching the Super Bowl and your favorite team just won, you know, the game-winning touchdown and you're in the stadium and you're cheering that loud and excited. I basically did that the entire drive. Not joking. Just continued to cheer that I'm going to make this. And I did. And it is so miraculous how I did it because, you know, you're supposed to get at the airport an hour before your flight. Mm-hmm. And I literally had an hour total. And how it happened is just like miraculous to me. It truly is. People will use their left brain, and I've used my left logical brain for a while to try and justify it. And I finally just said, there's just no way that happened. And it did. And I'm putting that out there sounding like a crazy person, but whatever. So, for example, you know, I was able to go a lot faster on the road, right? So I did. I went really fast on the road, like 80 miles an hour. And then there would be things like all of a sudden I'd slow down. And as soon as I slowed down to the speed limit, I turned right and there was a cop hiding right under the bridge of an overpass. And I was like, oh, there you go. And then I speed back up and keep going. And I remember getting to the airport, and there was a parking lot that was pretty much full right in front of the airport. If you've ever been to the San Bernardino Airport, and there was one spot available, like right up front. And I just pulled right in, grabbed my stuff. I run out. And I remember this. I go right up to the ticket counter and I was like, where's whatever airlines it was? I couldn't remember for the life of me. Like, where's Delta Airlines? And they're like, oh, that's in the next terminal.
Oh, no.
And my heart just sunk. And they go, oh, but you can take the tram. And I turn around and this tram just pulls up right in front of me. And I hop on it. It takes me over. Just one terminal. I get off. There is not a single person in the security line. and I just rush right through it. And I'm literally the last person to board the plane. And the person second to last boarding before me is just walking in to the plane. And I just, like, if you were on the plane already, you would have had no idea that I was late. Like, I was just perfectly the last person right behind the guy before me. And I just sat down in my chair. Obviously, I'm like covered in sweat and out of breath. And I just started laughing. And to me, that was a crazy experience because there was a moment, I'm sitting there looking at the map right now in front of me, Palm Springs to San Bernardino International Airport. And I remember there was a moment where I was like, there's no way. It's impossible. Then I just said, no, I'm going to do it. And with that much confidence and conviction, I made it happen. Now, here's the funny part about that story. There's another part to that story that I think is just hilarious. I actually missed my flight back home. True story. I got to the airport really early. It was like a 7 a.m. flight or something. And I literally got there and fell asleep and missed my flight back home.
Oh, no.
I don't know.
That's awful.
Maybe the universe had to do a little balancing out there. They're like, all right, we'll give you this one, but the next one, we got to take it. So I don't know. I share that story. I've shared that with other people. Like, to me, it was just like, it was a total miracle in, what I call bending time. To me, it was. And it sounds crazy hearing myself say it, but it was literally like, how did I do that? I don't know. Because I literally, I had to get, planes leave 20 minutes or they close the door like 10, 20 minutes before they board. So I got there really fast. And I like to say that I bent time.
And is this a common thing for you? Do you do this all the time now?
I don't think I do it all the time, but I think the point is, what we're going to get into with today's episode, as weird and crazy as this sounds, and as much as we want to just say, oh, James, that's just blah, 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 is that we do have a relationship with time. And that I do believe we have more power and control over it than we might think. And yeah, there are times that, for example, we'll be in the car. And have you ever had that happen, right? You worry you're going to be late. And the whole drive, you're just stressing about being late. And you're late. What I try and do today is say, what time is early or what time is on time? And say, no matter what, I was like, great. That's what time we're going to get there. And so, as we introduce people to a lot of this law of attraction stuff, it's really coming from a place of what you expect you get. And so I try to do that with time. I was like, no, we'll be there. And sometimes you're not. And then you find out like the other person was late. I mean, how many times have you had that happen, right? Where, like maybe you didn't get there on time, but then the other person was even later than you. So it's like they never noticed. Because that's really what you're worried about when you're late, right? Is that other people are going to like be waiting on you. So yeah, I mean, I have used it and it's kind of a fun practice. But I wanted to research this deeper. I wanted to look into this because I do feel like there is something about time. And we stumbled upon a book by Hendricks. It's a small ebook that you guys can all pick up for $17 called Einstein Time. And Einstein Time was like a paragraph or a chapter in Gay's book called The Big Leap. Did you read the book, The Big Leap?
Yeah, I think I've read a couple chapters, not the whole thing, but...
Fantastic book. Love the book, and I think a lot of our listeners have read the book and love it as well. So in this small little 17-pager ebook, Hendricks talks about this thing called Einstein Time. And basically says that, for the majority of humanity, or modern day man, we've had this reference to what is called Newton time. And Newton time references what is called really absolute time. And what absolute time is it's basically this belief or theory or fact, right, that time exists independently of any perceiver. And it progresses at a consistent pace throughout the universe. So you take a watch, put it by your bed, you see the seconds and the minutes tick away, you go to bed, come back, 8 hours have passed. Time is continuing to do its thing. However, have you ever gone to bed and realized that it didn't feel like 8 hours, right? Mm-hmm. Have you ever been hypnotized before? Mm-hmm. Feels like a few minutes, right? And we talked about this in the previous episode of our part 1 of the Time Chronicles, where going on a roller coaster could seem like 30 seconds, while waiting in line could seem like hours all day, right? Hanging out at the amusement park just goes by in seconds, while going to the dentist could seem like it takes forever. And so in this book, Hendricks really has a conversation as to why that is. And he introduced us to a concept that he calls Einstein time. which obviously Einstein, creator of the theory of relativity, comes to this place that time is relative, and then we all have a unique perception or relationship with time. And we talked about that in the previous episode as well. But that relationship changes based on what we're doing, right? Like, the example I gave in the previous episode is if you're working out, you're doing a heavy squat, right? You've got all this heavy weight on you, and the trainer says, hold this squatted position for 30 seconds. That's the longest 30 seconds of your life because it's painful. It's arduous. You're sweating bullets and you're like gritting your teeth. 30 seconds is a long, long time. While sometimes an entire day at Disneyland could feel like 30 seconds. And so at the end of the day, what Gay Hendricks proposes in this book, and I absolutely love it, is that when we come from this linear perspective of Newtonian time, where time is this external thing, we are very much a victim to time. We are at the mercy to time. There's either not enough time, right, to do the things that we need to do, or maybe you're like in a doctor's waiting room. We have these experiences, right, where it's like, okay, sit here and you're waiting, and you didn't expect to wait, or you're stuck in traffic, and you're just waiting. And now it's just wasting time, and time goes on too much. But either way, like, you are this victim to time. And he says when you switch over into Einstein time, you realize that you have the time, you have the power, you have the ability to create what you need to create in any time possible. And he says that the shift is really simple. It's that you need to go from having a relationship that time is this external variable that you have no control over to being the actual source of time. You are the source of time.
Yikes. That's a bold statement. Difficult to digest, I think, but I'm excited to break it down.
So I want to read a paragraph from this book. So Gay Hendricks says, realize that you are the source of time. You need to feel the truth of it in your bones. The moment you get that you are the source of time, you end the Newtonian split once and for all. I'll be blunt here, just as blunt as when I'm confronting limitations in my own mind. Quit thinking time is out there. Take ownership of time. Acknowledge that you are where it comes from, and it will stop owning you. Claim time as yours, and it will stop its claim on you. I don't know, Phoebe. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a lot to digest at the moment. I don't know. I'm getting it, but there are pieces that still, like, I understand the, like, owning it, the responsibility, but it still feels a little bit kind of out there for me.
Yeah, I totally get that. It is. Now, personally, I love it. Whether we truly are the source of time or not, I think at the very least that we are responsible for our relationship with time, that we create our story or our perspective of time is really what I get out of it. Because we talked about this in the previous episode. If you're sitting there saying, I don't have enough time, that's your opinion. No, James, that's a fact. There are other people getting it done in less time. I've seen how much quicker I can be at something. I've seen how I can get something done faster. I've seen how I don't need as much time as somebody else. And so we do create these stories. And I think a more empowering story is to realize that at the very least that we are the source of all those stories, right? That we're the ones creating that relationship with time. Whether or not we are the source of time is, not for something for me to ever really know. But we all do perceive time uniquely. And there's a lot of books on time management and articles that we were reading through that talk about the differences that successful people have in their relationship with time. And that is a huge thing. Whether it's they value time more, or they realize how much time is really in a day, or what they should be doing with their time. But I think that's the big difference. And so the next thing that Gay Hendricks does in this book is proposes a very simple question, which I like the question. And the question is there to help shine light really on, where do we feel disempowered? Where do we feel a lack of power when it comes to this relationship with time? So the question is, where in my life am I not taking full ownership? Or what am I trying to disown? Or what aspect of my life do I need to take full ownership of? what Gay Hendricks is really trying to propose here, which I really do love because I find corollary with this with what Chris Vondermaven was saying on the meditation episode. Like I start to find correlations with what people are saying. I start to say, hey, maybe there is some truth to this. Is that what Gay is saying here is that when we resist a situation, our experience of time is different than when we accept it. And so what I would do as a practice for each of you, well, it may not be easy. It's easy if you live in California and you drive a car. But if you ever get stuck in traffic, this is something that most people just can't stand. Unless you're listening to this podcast in traffic, then you probably love traffic. But what is the default mode of what happens when we're in traffic? We get frustrated, we get angry, we get a little agitated and anxious. We feel like we're not moving, not just literally, but like even metaphorically in our life. Everything's at a standstill. And so that's an example of us resisting that moment. What if you could accept that moment? Because when you resist it, it tends to just go even slower, doesn't it? It seems to just like crawl by. And so what I would invite you to try doing next time, maybe you're in line for something, it doesn't have to be traffic, is to truly accept that current reality, that present moment that you're in. The best way to accept it is to acknowledge that you choose that moment in time. To just choose it. To say, I choose to be stuck in traffic. I choose to be waiting in this line. And really get present to this is where you're at. That squirming and trying to kick your way out of it is not going to make the cars go faster. It's not going to make the line go quicker. But to instead just get present to this is where you are right now in this moment. Accept it. I choose to be waiting in this line, and I accept that.
It's funny that you mentioned traffic because I had something a couple weeks ago. I don't know where I was going, but I was in a rush. The Uber driver picks me up and all of a sudden something's flashing and like dinging in his car. We have to pull over and he is just like opening the hood of the car, opening the trunk, can't figure out what it is. And I had one of these moments where I was like, maybe, I can go one of two ways. And the normal reaction of mine would be really getting frustrated and probably calling another Uber and getting out. And for some reason, I was like, well, you know what? Maybe this is what's supposed to happen. And maybe there was an accident ahead or, maybe there was something else that I shouldn't have been there for. So I'm just going to sit here and help this guy. And, we're going to be in this moment together. And it was one of the most, just freeing moments because I was like, this is great. Like now I'm okay with it because I'm in this moment and I'm being very present. And then we got there when, I got there late and it was not a big deal. But when you're talking about traffic, I'm like, oh yeah, I have been in that very same situation. And it turned out to be a really kind of nice moment, I guess.
Because you could have chosen to resist it.
Right.
But you chose to go with it. Mm-hmm. And so the theory that I'm proposing here, I'm no expert on this, is that we can affect our experience of time based on our ability to accept or resist our current situation. And again, I mentioned Chris Vondermaven's episode on meditation. He has a lot of that voice in your head that he calls the monkey mind exists because we have these moments in our life where we're not present. We don't accept who we are and where we are and what we're doing. We resist it in some way. And I believe, this is my theory, and it's just something to play around with. These are just thoughts and ideas that us choosing to resist something, to not accept the current situation can have an effect on our experience of time. That's kind of what we're playing around with here. I find that so fascinating. Now, what Gay Hendricks is going into is that you are the source of time. And I love that as well because it does put you in the driver's seat. It does give you a little bit more of an empowering relationship. And I play around with this. I try to say, kind of like what we talked about earlier about, listen, you don't have all the time. You can't do everything out there on the planet, in the world. Just like if you sat down at a restaurant or you went to a buffet, you couldn't eat everything. Your stomach won't hold everything, but you can have anything. And I think that's pretty cool. And so time is this thing that forces us in a way or dictates the fact that we have to choose. But I still believe we can choose whatever we want. And time doesn't have to be the thing that is the barrier, that is the thing in the way of what we truly want. It can be there as a governor, a limiter from like, everything in the world, right? You know, like you're here for a certain amount of time. There's only so much you could do. I mean, you could travel to every country and every place in the world, but you can't live for 10 years in every country, in every city you couldn't even live in every city for a year in the world. There's only so much, right? And so I always want to get clear on, what do I truly want, right? And we've talked about this in previous episodes. What do you truly want? What is important to you? What is the essence of what matters to you? And I think what we're really trying to get across here is that time is something that we could create a much more empowering relationship with, so that it is not the thing that hinders or gets in the way of what we want. So what we wanted to do with the remainder of this episode, to bring it home a little bit, so we're not just too out there in like the theoretical. So hopefully that did make sense, but we want to ground this a little bit with some practices. These are 6 beliefs that I believe are limiting beliefs that may not necessarily have anything to do with time themselves, but I believe are eating away at your time. And we want to go ahead and take a look at these. So Phoebe, what's the first one?
The first one is that more time equals more money. We talked about that a little bit on the last episode too.
We did. So the more time you work, the more money you make is a very dangerous concept. As an entrepreneur and a business owner, extremely dangerous. If you're an employee, yeah, I mean, that's very accurate, but we're not employees. And we can't continue that belief. Why? Well, simply put, there's only so many hours in the day. Even if we do have the power to stop time or bend time just a little bit, there's only so many hours in the day, which means you can only make so much money. And when people have a desire then to create more money, their default becomes, well, I'll work longer. I'll work harder. I'll spend more hours. I'll sacrifice more from my family. And I don't think that's the best way to go about it. And so we talked about this in the previous episode, is that if you want to make more money, it's not about more time. It's about solving bigger problems and reaching more people. Limiting belief number 2. This is a belief that you have to be doing it all. I'm going to shed some light on our listeners here. When people come into this space and they want to learn about business, social media, and online marketing, there's this very common thing where people do this thing like, if you don't do this, your business will die, right? Have you seen this?
Yeah.
Right? Like, this is what you know, if you're not doing this, then bad result. Or why you must be doing this. And I think social media did this on a level that I think is unprecedented and just total bogus BS. A lot of people who are social media evangelists were just like, if you're not doing this, you will die. Your business will suffer. It will die. And so what we're left with is a lot of people who feel this guilty need to be everywhere. They've got to be on Facebook, networking, connecting all day long, right? They have this, what I call the social media FOMO, this fear of missing out, that if they're not on all the social networking sites, if they're not on Instagram, YouTube, and Periscope, and Snapchat, and this, and in all these groups all day, that they're missing out on all this business and that they're going to lose money. Their business is going to die. Does that sound like you? I know so many people who've talked about a fear of, if they're not pumping out enough content, if they're not doing all this stuff on all these different social media sites, then their business is going to shrivel up and die because people have forgotten who they were after 2 weeks. And that's just not the case.
And it's stressful. Oh my God. Like just hearing you say that, I'm like, gosh, I can't even imagine. And all the new things that are coming out. And if you're not on Snapchat and you're not on Periscope and Facebook Living every, couple hours, like that just gives me anxiety thinking about it.
Yeah. So here's the thing that people don't realize is that when you're trying to do it all, you're probably not doing any of them very well. Mm-hmm. And so my best practice for everybody is to pick one first and just do it awesomely well. Just kick ass 100% on this, right? It's the whole, jack of all trades, master of none. You're a jack of all social media sites, but you're a master of none. Master one. So that for me, that was YouTube. I spent years doing nothing but YouTube. And then I would go to sites like Facebook and then later Instagram and even sites like LinkedIn. And that's where I would promote my YouTube content. But I wasn't trying to build a massive community over on any of those other sites. I was just using YouTube. And now we're focusing a lot on the podcast. And that's where my effort's going. And I'm using other sites to promote that. But I'm not trying to build a Facebook group and a YouTube community and a podcast and the craziest Instagram following while I'm periscoping and Snapchatting 10 times a day. That's nuts. If you're trying to do it all yourself, that's crazy. Now, if you are doing it and it's not burning you out, it's not overwhelming you, and you're like, dude, I'm good, I'm fine. Well, that's awesome. Keep doing that. But if you're coming from this place of like, this guilt, right? That's where this FOMO comes from. You don't have to do it all. And that's what we want to get across here. Okay, let's talk about this third limiting belief. Now, this third limiting belief is about outsourcing. We have an episode dedicated to outsourcing. I love outsourcing. We're going to talk more in the next episode about it, but there are kind of a three-prong limiting beliefs around outsourcing. So Phoebe, what are those?
So the first one is, and I hear this all the time, I can't afford to outsource.
Oh, yeah.
So that's something I know that's like one of my biggest pet peeves, because I think the response is always, well, you can't afford not to. So
yeah, I like to say if you can't afford to outsource, it's because you haven't been outsourcing. Mm-hmm. And it's just such a backwards mentality. It really is. And especially when you could find people to do things for $2 an hour. How could you be in business and not afford $2? Let's get a job and raise some money first, save some money first, and then we can start the business and do it the right way.
Right. Well, the second one is no one can do it as well as I can. And again, very guilty of this one as well, when you could just outsource it to someone else and maybe they don't do it as well as you can. Maybe they do it better, but giving them the opportunity to have a go. And maybe for me personally, a lot of what I used to do was I would outsource it and then I would get it back and just revise it, and
Sure.
It would be just as good.
I love that. Now, I am going to say something because I want to rub people's noses in these beliefs. They're limiting. You have to get that they limit you when that's what you don't see them as beliefs. You see them as truth, but they're not, because it's not true, right? It's just a belief that we hold. It's a thought we keep thinking, and it's limiting us. And this one is no different. If you're saying no one can do it as well as I can, I'm just going to say you're a bad business owner, because if you're running a business where you have to do it all, that's not a business. That's just a glorified freelance job. A true business, everything is replicatable, duplicatable, systematized, and can be done by others. And if you've created a business where you're the only one who can do anything, you haven't really created a business, let alone a great one. It's going to need a big shift there, because you can't grow when you're holding on to saying, no one can do it as well as I can. And the other thing is, it's just not true anyway. Not only is it a bad business practice to be the only person that can do the things that need to be done, but it's just not true. There are people that in my business just blow me away with a thing, and like, I could never do that. And that's what you want. That's what you need. So that's a big one. And we need to squash that immediately.
And the third one is something I also am very guilty of. It's quicker if I just do it myself. And I think that comes back to the actual, like the training process that it takes to train your new employees or, you know, your freelancers or whoever it is. Yeah, that process does take a little bit of time at the beginning. But then, you know, I know we've talked on previous episodes about Princess Pellegrino, who's awesome. And I took a little bit of time up front, and now she does it. It's like clockwork, and I don't have to worry about her. I just know it's getting done.
Yes.
So that's something I think I hear all the time also. And again, just isn't true.
Yeah. You know, I remember an example of when we had a programmer there's just a virtual assistant from the Philippines, and I needed him to install a simple script. And the first time he did this, I mean, it must have been 2 days of us back and forth. No, you got to follow this direction. You got to add it here. And you need the username and password. Okay, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, the thought crept in, I could have done this by myself by now, right? And then 2 months later, we needed that same assignment done again. I needed that same script installed on another website. And I was like, hey, remember that script? Can you install it on this site? That was how short my email was. And then it was like the next day, I was like, yep, done. And so when you realize that, yes, your current reality, if you hired someone today, outsourced, local, whatever, that thought's going to creep in your head daily, minute by minute. This is quicker if I just do it myself. That's the old way of doing it. But if you realize that you're building something bigger, if you realize that you're building something long term, that down the road, it's not going to be that way. I look at the members of our team that we've groomed in just 6 months. Heck, just like 3 months. And the progress they've made, Like, yeah, I invest in them. I work with them. I teach them new things. I give them processes. They get experience. And I go, oh my goodness, just in a 3-month or a 6-month period, the difference, the added value that they provide to us, that I can sit there and just be like, hey, remember when we did this thing? Can you go set that up again? Yep, done. So stop looking at just the assignment that's in front of you and realize, like, what are you working towards? That's a big one. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's look at the next one. Okay, so those were 3 beliefs around the topic of outsourcing, right? I can't afford to outsource. No one can do it as well as I can. It's quicker if I just do it myself. We want to squash those 3. But let's take a look at one of the other limiting beliefs we came up with, which is that it has to be perfect the first time. Perfectionism, there's a whole episode that we've got to dedicate to perfectionism, but trying to be the perfectionist is going to really eat at your time. Mm-hmm. Because what you're going to try and do is spend more of your time trying to get it right and perfect before you launch it, before you go live, before the public sees it. And one of the ways I want to squash this limiting belief, and this is the easiest way to do this because it's so logical, is that how could something that you're going to present to the public, like let's say it's a brand new course you're creating, how could it be perfect before anybody experiences it? It's the actual feedback and user experience that your customers and users will have that will allow you to make it perfect, that you can't have if no one sees it. Did that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the whole like lean startup concept of like you just do a little bit and then you get feedback, incorporate the feedback, and then do more and continue to improve.
And one of the things we'll talk about in the next episode, which I'm really excited about, which is how to get your time back. These are other cool hacks that we're doing from principles and strategies and tactics. Is one of them is what I basically call a minimum viable project. And it's really running a project, a promotion, a launch, etc., and to always identify what are the minimum viable tasks, really, to get this done. And we'll go deep into that there are times when we're like, wow, we don't even need a sales page for this. Yeah, we don't need that. Why do we really need to have this, and this? And how many times we'll spend our time doing those, right? We talked about the 5% rule from the previous episode. We're doing those 95% of activities that are like, oh, I worked really hard setting this up, but it didn't have anything to do with what's going to really get you the results. And we want to get really good at prioritizing, not trying to perfect. So it's prioritization over perfection. And then the last limiting belief is a great practice we want to start working on, is that people believe that their email is their to-do list. And I know I am guilty of this. But what this is really doing is causing us to be reactive in our business. If the first things you do in the morning is check your email and check Facebook, I know it sounds harmless, but what it's doing is it's letting those things dictate your day. And what we'll talk about in the next day is how we can plan more effectively so we choose the day, not the day chooses us. We get to decide what we're doing. How many times you open up your email, whatever's on top is what you focus your time on. That's easy. That's lazy. That's I'm working. Look at me. I open the laptop. But you're just doing whatever's in front of you. So your email, the top of your inbox, the top of social media, the latest message that's come in, the latest update on your phone is not your to-do list.
I have to say I'm really guilty of that. But what I managed to do is I have something called Boomerang. You use that, James?
I haven't, but I've heard of it.
Oh, I love it. And so anytime an email comes in, I just boomerang it and it comes right back to me at a certain given time that I have designated as like my email time. So we'll say all my emails will come in at like 4:30 in the afternoon. And I know at the end of the day, I just address all of those before, so I don't actually deal with any of them during the day or in the morning.
I feel like I would just keep boomeranging emails.
I know that's the dangerous part.
Yeah.
Then I just never get back to people. But yeah, I don't know. For me, it really works. And it's something because I struggle with that big time. You know, I used to like roll over and just check my phone and be on my phone for an hour. It's just not productive.
Well, if that sounds like anybody else, I think we're going to have some remedies and some best practices. Now, again, these are, and we'll talk about that in the next episode, but these are habits that you're going to have to be able to develop. And we can't really, develop these habits if we still have a poor unserving, disempowered belief or relationship around time. And so as we wrap up this episode, at the end of the day, where we want you at is for you to feel empowered around time, is that to come from a place of an abundance of time, that you can create all the time that you need to do the things that really matter to you. You won't have the time to do all the things in the world. You can't do it all. But that you can be okay with that, right? Do you need to learn every sport and every hobby? Do you need to travel to every city in every country and live in all those places before you die? Probably not. But it doesn't mean you can't live wherever you want and do the things that you truly do want. And that's the point. That's why we have preferences, right? We don't like everything. You don't like every food ever created, so we get to choose to do the things that we want. And I really want you guys to come from that place, that you have the time, whether you want to believe or not, that you are the source of time, which I like that. I want you to try that on. I'm going to try that on for a little bit, but that you can create an abundance of time for the things that you want in your life. And so before we introduce you to that next episode, which will be in the next week, unless it's already come out, this is your chance to continue the practice of observing your story, your complaints, and your relationship with time. What is it that you say about time? Hey, do you have a second? No, I can't. I'm really busy. Hey, could you do this for me? No, I can't. I don't have the time. It'll start to scare you how frequent we say those things. It scares me to see how much I do it and how much I get triggered when I do something that was a complete waste of my time. Mm-hmm. And so it's a practice. It's a continual practice, and that's what I want to encourage all of you guys to do. So to recap, we talked a little bit about this concept between Newtonian absolute time. This is the linear time, that time is this absolute non-changing measuring of seconds in time that we have no effect on. It has a complete effect on us, versus a complete paradigm shift in the way we experience time. Einstein Time, where time is now relative, where we are now the source of time, that we can create the time necessary to do the things that we truly enjoy. And we do that by stepping into and accepting our current present moments and not resisting them. Just like when I got in that car, I could have sat there complaining and shaking my head and cursing, why did this have to happen? Instead, I just cranked up my emotional meter and started cheering the entire time like I was at the Super Bowl, watching the winning touchdown. I fully embraced that moment. I still remember that entire drive. Somehow, I made it. Whether it was me just going really fast and knowing when to slow down at the right times to avoid cops and parking in the right spot, who knows? But we can't deny that I did make that flight, even if I didn't make the flight back home. And then we talked about some of these other sneaky beliefs that have nothing to do with time necessarily, but might be eating away at your day. Things like the link we have between time and money. If you want to make more money, you got to spend more time. You got to work longer. Or this belief that you have to do it all. You've got to be on social media, PPC, Facebook ads, blogging, retargeting, videos. Right? You got to be doing it all. And it's just not true. You don't have to do it all. You could do one thing or a few things extraordinarily well and actually see better results. Then we talked about some of the limiting beliefs people have around the topic of outsourcing, delegating, letting go, and hiring. Concepts like, I can't afford to do it, no one can do it as well as I can, and it's quicker if I just do it myself. These are all things that I know we've all said at one point, and they're just not true. But not only are they not true, they are limiting you in a way that you can't even fathom. What is the cost holding on to those beliefs? And then another belief, it has to be perfect. It has to be perfect before I launch, before I put it out there, before the world sees it. And that's just not true. You spend a lot of time trying to make it perfect. And then the last one is that whatever's at the top of your inbox or your social media newsfeed is your to-do list. That is the quickest way to become a reactive victim, a whim to whatever people need from you that day in that moment. These and more are things that are eating away at our time. And this series of the Time Chronicles is really dedicated to what we see as the biggest problem plaguing people today, which is they don't have enough time. It saddens me so much. We have a course out there on Facebook advertising. It teaches Facebook ads. It teaches people how to create an automated funnel, literally where you could make, we made thousands in sales a day on my wedding, the days leading up to my wedding, and even on our little mini honeymoon. I didn't do any work. And I'll teach this to people. And they'll say that the number one reason why they didn't learn it or implement it is because they didn't have the time. Breaks my heart. This is such a epidemic in the entrepreneurial business community because we've all been convinced that we have to be doing more, that we have to be hustling 14 to 18 hours a day. Listen, if you're doing the right things, you don't need to be working that many hours. Tim Ferriss said it himself. My favorite quotes. He said, being busy is a form of laziness. Lazy thinking and indiscriminate action. You are not an employee, you are an entrepreneur. Just logging hours in front of the computer does not guarantee more money. All right, so in our next episode of the Time Chronicles, we're going to talk about how to get your time back. We're landing the plane a bit to talk about specific strategies, tactics, habits, practices that I've put into place that have helped me not waste time. And we want to show you what we've been doing. So I hope you've enjoyed our little series that we've put together so far. If you haven't left a review for us over on iTunes, you can do that now because Phoebe and I love hearing feedback from our listeners. Head on over to jameswedmore.com/iTunes. Share with us your thoughts and experiences about the podcast, especially because the more ratings we get, the more that helps our ranking in iTunes so we can get this podcast and our message out to more entrepreneurs and business owners who are feeling overwhelmed and stressed out.
And as you guys know, we are doing listener questions of the week. So if you would like to be featured or you have a question for us, go ahead and submit your question using the link in the show notes or head over to our website at www.mindyourbusinesspodcast.com.
Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. Take care. Are you frustrated that no matter how hard you hustle, no matter how much you get done in a day, you still feel like you have little results to show for it? Do you feel like you're doing everything right, but there's still something missing? Well, what if there was an easier way? What if your business could be fun, effortless, and profitable? Phoebe and I have put together a free audio MP3 for you, compiling the 77 business affirmations for creating success from the inside out. And we want to give it to you absolutely free. This is your chance to rewire your brain for bigger results in your life and your business. To get instant access absolutely free, simply visit 77affirmations.com. That's the number 77affirmations.com.